Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Gunn Show presented by MTDCNC Global. Well, what is the Gunn Show? Come on, guys, you already know. You've been listening to this point. But if you don't know, it's about creating the authenticity of the people, the humanness of the people who push the buttons on the machines, the marketers, the engineers. I mean, come on. We're all flying in planes. We're all riding in cars. Some of us can't even get off of our phones and laptops. You want to know who's making that? That's our industry. That's engineering and manufacturing. This is the Gunn Show. So welcome back to the Gunn Show, and I have a special guest with me. He goes by the name Chris Fox, and if you think you don't know him, you know his beard, you know his tattoos, you know his face, you've seen him walking around, and once you see him, you go, yeah, you're right, I know him. But we're going to learn a little bit more about Chris today. So, Chris, welcome to the Gunn Show, my friend.
Thank you. Glad you made mention of my beard. It's an important part of my brand these days. So.
Well, we all got to do a little something to get recognized. If we were musicians of some sort, which you might be with that beard, I'm not talented enough, we'd be doing something funky to grab attention there, too. So whatever works, brother. It looks good on you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a musician, too. So, I mean, it's there, right? I mean, you got to, bring your personal world into your professional world. That's what it's all about.
I absolutely agree. So, Chris, let's get to know you a bit more. And we might know the Viking-looking dude walking around the trade shows or the ones we talk to about marketing, maybe on Zoom meetings. But let's really get to know you. Would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are as a young man and maybe the growth of who you are today and how you got into the industry that we're in right now?
Yeah. So, well, I graduated from college with a degree in English and philosophy. So I decided a long time ago I didn't want to make any money ever, and and actually I started my work. I graduated from college in 2008, so I graduated in the best jobs market we've had in a long time, and so because of that. I found myself immediately struggling to find a job as, any sort of editor or writer anywhere. And I actually ended up working in a car shop. And that's kind of was my first real exposure to any sort of manufacturing, engineering, hands-on stuff. I'd always been good with, dabbling in technology. I did well in shop in high school, but it was never like a true interest of mine. It was a part of my repertoire, but that was it. But then, when I found myself in that space, I found I was excelling at it and enjoyed it. And then shortly thereafter, when the economy started to recover a little bit, I actually entered into the journalism space of the manufacturing industry. And I wrote for an engineering publication, which I believe is no longer around, and then transitioned to manufacturing.net, which is, I think it's still around these days. I think Industrial Equipment News now owns that brand. Good group of guys. Actually, I think most of those guys are still busy in the journalism space. And but that was my first real heavy exposure to true what we know, what you and I know as the manufacturing industry, right? The engineering space. And so I spent a few years doing that, and then realized that there was some real cool opportunity to start doing marketing because I knew how to write and I wanted to dabble in video. And so I got a job actually with a great brand that I'm still a huge fan of, which is Tormach. And I work with them even to this day as I run my own business. And their philosophy and everything, that their mindset behind manufacturing is to try to create this space that encourages entrepreneurialism, especially in the United States, which is such a cool opportunity there to get machines in the hands of people. There's usually, for the longest time, there was such a gap between, if you want to make something, you need to have lots and lots of money and lots of equipment. These machines allow that, lower that barrier a little bit. And so that was a really cool space. I really got engrossed into the maker movement and that sort of thing while I was there. I spent some time working for a marketing agency in the manufacturing space. And now I live in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, and I run my own kind of content engine for manufacturing, where I do a lot of writing, a lot of video, and all that kind of stuff for manufacturers in the industry. I still, like I said, I still do stuff with Tormach. I've worked with Okuma and Makino a little bit. I also work regularly with some of the brand ambassador folks in this space. John Saunders specifically, he's a great dude, and I talk with John regularly, and we do some projects together and things like that as well. So it's now in my veins, and my writing and stuff like that is still there, but the content is married into something that's really cool. And what I love about this industry, and like you said in your intro, there's all these things that we use every single day. And what's really cool is when you start going behind the scenes, you start to recognize where this stuff actually comes from, because it's got to get made, right? I mean, it's not like someone's picking. I mean, my cell phone has to be assembled. It can't just show up and be programmed. It's got to have some sort of, somebody's got to create it. And wherever they are, whatever they're doing, it's such a cool thing to just experience that. And so with that, I dabble, like I said, in marketing and in the manufacturing space, but then I also do some writing for engineering.com. So I like to see both the creation, like napkin sketch concept idea, to products actually getting made. And it's really cool to kind of see that arc of transition, because so many people don't even know that what happens in that arc, and even engineers that are on the far concept end don't fully understand how things have to get made. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a machinist that complains about, an engineer wanting a square inside corner. They don't understand that you have a machine with a round turning tool that, you can't make square corners. It just doesn't work. So that's one of those really cool things, is to kind of see that dynamic and understand how things get made from beginning to end.
Well, firstly, just let me say, coming out with those 2 degrees in 2008, congratulations on not being homeless, and and really, kudos to you there. Well done, and obviously that shows your skills and capability. You did a few name drops there, which I love. John Saunders, yeah, fantastic guy. NYC, putting out some great content. I actually coincidentally made a post recently on LinkedIn talking about how guys like yourself and John and myself and my buddy Titan and Making Chips, who you're friends with as well, and so on and so forth, we're in this together. This is not competition. We're in this together because it's important that this industry has a voice that can convey the significance of what we create. You mentioned your cell phones, you mentioned the technology, but on a global scale, I would say that we've somewhat been looked down upon in the manufacturing world as dirty, grimy people in a machine shop, right? And maybe it's the misfit ways that some of us are, the fact how we got in it, but at the same time, that's not necessarily true when we talk about now the automation and some of the cleanliness of the shops. And yeah, there's dirty shops, don't get me wrong, and I love those shops just as much as I love the clean ones, but the stereotype needs to be broken, and people like yourself are helping us do that. So let me just say thank you for that. And in doing so, you and I had talked a little bit about the engineering and manufacturing world, and although we are getting better, we're still, I would say, we could use a little work in the marketing side of things. Where do you think we could use the most help?
Yeah, well, and that, like, we had talked about that before. I mean, that space is so tricky, right? Because, I mean, manufacturing as an industry, manufacturing and engineering as industries are not early adopters, right? And I've actually written pieces about this a number of times. I mean, there's a number of justifiable reasons why we're not early adopters, right? I mean, whether you're talking capital equipment, change management, or I mean, something much scarier, where like failure, right? I mean, if you spend a bunch of money on something and it doesn't work, not only are you out money, but you're out lead time, and so these are all big, scary things which make manufacturers super hesitant for any sort of risk at all, let alone spending money on something like, say, marketing, which you're kind of throwing money into the void and hoping something good comes out on the other end, right? But it's not that way anymore, and that's what's interesting about where myself, and there's a few, like I mentioned before, there are a few other main businesses that are marketing agencies for manufacturing that get this. But unfortunately, there are a lot of agencies out there that see manufacturing as this low-hanging fruit, right? They know there's a ton of money in this space. They know B2B is super, there's a lot of opportunity, and as manufacturing grows, there's going to be even more opportunity. So they want to be a piece of that, right? They want to jump in and be a part of that, but they don't know manufacturing. And that's a concerning issue, because then you have these agencies that are pitching these super crazy high level opportunities to gain leads and get visitors to your website and everything else, but they don't know what they're talking about because this industry is different. And that's where I think, like you said, I mean, we're all kind of friends in this space. Like, there really isn't and shouldn't be any competition, because there's tons of manufacturers out there that need help. I think really the competition is marketers against trying to convince these folks that they need to spend money on these things, because there is so much opportunity, but it's not realized yet. And while some businesses, and I tell you, I've run into this a lot, where they say, well, we're fine with the work that we have. Why would we spend money on marketing? And it's like, well, okay, that's fine, but if you're running flat, eventually that runs out, and it will run out at some point, right? And we kind of saw that a little bit with the Boeing stuff when they grounded the 737. When that suddenly happened, there were a lot of aerospace manufacturers that all of a sudden were like, well, that's our big client. Like, what do we do now, right? And some of them went under, unfortunately, but then a lot of them understood the pivot. And that's probably the key part, is understanding, like, it's all about communication. It's all about community in this space. And that's, I think that's kind of a transition to solving some of that skills gap issue too, because for so long, manufacturers, they had their team of machinists, and they were like, well, these are our guys. And, if their guy can threaten to go to the shop across the street for more money, and suddenly now not only you have to either pay him more or lose him, but now that's opportunity cost, and now you're competing against them, not just for clients but for employees. That's not the right way to do it. Instead, we need to usher more people into this space, and that's where marketing comes in too. Because you look at a Pepsi commercial. How often do you see people actually giving a shit or drinking Pepsi in a Pepsi commercial, right? I mean, it's all about lifestyle and the exciting. I mean, Red Bull. Red Bull is the perfect example. You never see someone actually drinking a Red Bull in a Red Bull commercial unless it's the cartoon one. But in any of their other marketing efforts, all of their other marketing efforts are based on people doing these extreme sports, doing this crazy stuff that apparently Red Bull gives you the energy to do. Who cares? Red Bull's branded all over it. Manufacturing is, like you said, they've got that dirty, grimy mindset from the outside. And that's the thing is, well, there is some of that. We embrace, those of us that are in it embrace that. Or you find spaces that don't have that, because there are plenty of spaces that, you have medical, you have aerospace, I've seen some of the cleanest shops in my career that, like, eat off the floor clean. And it's cleaner than my house. And it's a manufacturing space, So I think that's the biggest gap that I see in this space, is that there's no, the projection of what folks in our space do needs to be larger, and it needs to be really show off what we're doing. And there's a lot of stop gaps to that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there if people just start documenting what they do, share those stories, tell those stories, hire people like me to tell those stories for you. There's so much opportunity out there that I really feel like it's hard to fail if you find ways to quote unquote market, but really you're sharing these stories and pushing out this content that really kind of reveals what we're doing in this space.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Chris. I really do. I want to revisit what you said about competition. Because it's not with each other. And you said it's conveying a message or convincing the guys that they need marketing in a space where it's, typically hadn't been utilized to its full potential, right? And when I think of it, the first thing that pops in my head, and you mentioned Pepsi, and somebody goes, well, we're doing good. Well, the first thing that pops in my head is someone like Coca-Cola. Well, so is Coca-Cola. In fact, they're probably the largest on the planet. And you see a commercial, just about every other commercial when you're on TV. So obviously it's still important, even if you're a big dog in the fight.
Yep.
The other thing I want to revisit, because I think that what you said was important, is people want a piece of the pie when they see money there. So there's a lot of, and I don't ever want to talk down about any person or company. That's not my responsibility. I want to promote everyone as often as I can. But I think it's responsible of us to pay attention to when someone is doing something just for money, and when the message that's being conveyed is learned through years and years of dedication to an industry. And I don't want, as much as I love seeing really incredible, beautiful videos that come out but have no understanding of our machining technology, personally, I would rather see somebody pick up a cell phone, take a video of what they're machining right there when the machine's an absolute mess, post that online and tell me how you did it, than investing, you know, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 on a video where professional lights come in, tarps come in to protect glares. We all put makeup on to make sure we're beautiful enough for the camera. Like, to me, the industry of fashion and design, when you think about that, that's what they do. And you talked a little bit about that. You know, what's the image of the industry? Well, Red Bull is to give you wings and help you fly, right? You know, if it's going to be sunglasses, what are you protecting from? How beautiful do you look? If it's clothes and suits and dresses, it's that same. But with us, it's a bit different. And I think we need people like yourself to go, okay, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to talk your language, and we're going to talk about this in the way that you want it to be conveyed, and not just make a pretty smoke and mirrors type of thing to make you look good.
Right. Well, and what's interesting too is, like, I think, you know, not just marketers like me in this space, but you know, people who are spending those dollars, they get myopic in the sense of they don't fully, like, you have to step away from your baby to recognize exactly the right way it needs to be pitched. And you know what I mean? Like, and maybe you have an ugly baby, and that's okay, but you have to kind of navigate it, right? but you know what I'm saying? Like, the idea of being in this space and navigating how to portray this message. People, I mean, they'll kill a project because what's the right way to say this? They will kill a project because they'll think about it so much that by the time they get to actually making it, it's not worth making anymore, right? And I've run into that with clients, and a lot of times, especially in the video space, like that, what I'll do is I will give them two pricing options. One pricing option is, you know, let me do my thing. I know this industry. I know your brand. Let me do my thing. You get this price option. If you want to pick it apart and you have some very specific things and editing techniques that you want to use, that's cool. But that's a different price point, because at that point, it's gonna get real myopic real fast, right? Because you get so close and you're so focused on that one project that you forget that you're trying to market to somebody that doesn't even know what your product does. You know what I mean? Like, people will companies will delve into, like, they want to talk about, you know, like, I'm trying to think of anything not company specific, but like, okay, so say you're dealing with a machine tool and they want to get like super into the weeds with feeds and speeds, and even more so like feeds and speeds with specific types of tooling in specific types of material. And then they want to talk about like very specific horsepower situations, like how much torque you're going to have in a certain environment. And that's great, but you're narrowing your field too far with a piece of content like that. You know, instead, let's churn this stuff out, right? Let's find a good way to document all of these things without spending all of this time, because they think that there's this one big project, like you said, $20, $30, $40,000 video. Well, it's like, well, then that video better do everything and anything it can possibly do, because that's a big budget, right? If you can figure it out for significantly less money, maybe you just shoot it on a cell phone and then hire a video editor, or even figure out how to do some makeshift video editing in your space. I mean, like, rock and roll, like it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's, I think that's what the YouTube generation has started to teach people. But we have, I mean, again, we're a slow to adopt industry. And so people still have the mindset like they did when everyone was doing just print ads. They wanted to have this just shiny, sparkly, perfect ad because it was going to sit in, you know, an issue of Modern Machine Shop for a month or two, before I ended up in the restroom, but that's, because let's be real, that's where all the magazines end up. Yeah. But
I figure that's where people are listening to our podcast and scrolling through LinkedIn right now as well. So, right. The document might have changed, but the place of reading has not.
100%. Right. But you could spend all that time on that ad and making it perfect, but then it's like, it's one and done, right? It's there and it's gone. And what the new generation of marketing and just content in general has really taught us is that it goes away much faster. And so then at that point, it doesn't matter if you spend weeks on it. It doesn't matter if you spend tens of thousands of dollars on it. Unless you put some legs on it, it's there and it's gone. It's very fly by night when in that, not fly by night's not the right way to say that. It's very passive, people see it and it's gone forever. Now, granted, you can keep feeding it, right? You can use marketing strategies and paid concepts and things like that to get things in front of people more often and more regularly and try to get more value behind the thing that you created. And that's great. But there also is a lot of opportunity in just creating a lot of content as quickly as possible. And it can be quick and dirty. It doesn't have to be this pristine, perfect thing. Now, if you're going to put money behind it and spend money on like an ad, well, yeah, for sure. At that point, spend some money, make it look professional, hire somebody that can make it cleaned up and make it look good, because you're going to put that in front of more people more often. But man, there are so many opportunities that get missed because people just don't, you got a camera in your pocket. You know what I mean? Like, bust out your phone. And this industry is tricky that way too, because I hear this a lot, is people can't take pictures of parts because they're proprietary, or there's a laundry list of different things. But at the end of the day, like, maybe you're cutting work holding, do that. And let's be real, people in this space see some weird set of work holding, and they're like, oh, I want to know what they're holding with that. Well, I can't show you on video, but maybe you can come visit us, and maybe now we have, Like, that's an opportunity to maybe get a lead because they want to see what the hell you're making with that weird work holding setup. You know what I mean? So there's so much opportunity in that space. If people just create stuff, I think there's a lot more ways to see different ways to get people into your shop, into your, whatever you want to call it, into your DMs, into your email, however you want to define that. But there's so much lost to, I don't know if we should, in this space. When really, I think at the end of the day, other than proprietary stuff with clients, because you obviously got to walk that line lightly. Otherwise, at that point, what do you got to lose? You know what I mean? Start putting content out there and build.
Yeah, I agree. I want to go back to the magazine and the modern day marketing.
Yeah.
So the unique thing I believe that's happening now, and you kind of said it comes and it goes. Let's put out a lot of content. And I agree with that. If you follow anything on my LinkedIn page or, somewhat Instagram and Facebook, which I don't nearly do quite as much as LinkedIn, you'll see random selfies of me on top of a mountain, and then a cool video that I create, while driving flying a drone around, to then, in all seriousness, an interview with a customer about a machine and a testimonial. So it's different types of algorithms that go along with it. But the unique concept, I think, from it not being just a here it is today, gone tomorrow kind of a thing, and a magazine was a 1 month, 2 month, before it goes into the bathroom, as you said, thing that sat around, is that we will use a year from now, most likely 2 years from now, certainly right now, and a year ago and a year before that, Google. We will Google everything. And what do we Google first? Well, typically most of us go and Google immediately YouTube, and nowadays LinkedIn as well, and we watch a video. Well, what's somebody else doing? How did they do it? Is there a success story that I can be a part of as well? And by utilizing things like YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram and the proper hashtags that go along with it, it almost makes these things infinite. And so while we can create as much content as we want, it never truly disappears, which is also somewhat scary, because if we do something really dumb, which I do all the time, you can't get rid of it. It's there forever. So that's the unique concept of today's marketing, is if we create, and you can do this really with digital magazines or with blogs as well. It's really all about, connecting those hashtags. But if somebody does a Google search, 9 times out of 10, they're going to watch a video first, and then that video is going to inspire them to go to that company's website. So now we're thinking, okay, how do I create positive, inspiring marketing content, whether it be through a blog or a video, whatever it might be. My personal preference is video, to inspire someone enough to then go to my website. And if they go to my website better be on par, because that's where they're gonna do the bulk of their research. You mentioned it a second ago where you said speeds, fees, depth of cut, work holding, tooling, programming, yeah, that's all important once you decide what machine you think you're going to go with. So we're generating the awareness to take people to a website. Now get your website together. And now this is a full circle type of thing, right? What's going on?
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, and I guess I probably got lost a little bit in my ramble there too, but yeah, for sure. Like the social aspect is hyper temporary, but yeah, I mean, content lives in longevity, right? And that is like, and digital is hyper recyclable. So yeah, absolutely. Like that's exactly the value. Whereas I guess my whole thing, and at one point, I don't know if you're familiar with the Content Marketing Institute at all.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So at one point, I was working with some folks over there on some like keynote style stuff, and one of the things that we talked about was, safe marketing is never good marketing, and that was kind of the diatribe that we rolled on with that. But really, at the heart of that, it's really about you can't let making something this perfect shiny piece of marketing content get in the way of putting something out there, and like you said, you got to be careful about it because it will live forever. But there is some genuosity to the idea that if you put something out there, maybe you messed it up. Maybe whatever you filmed, maybe the number that you put in the video was wrong. I don't know. I mean, there's any kind of number of tiny little things that could go wrong in that situation. But that almost adds personality to your brand. And I mean, the perfect thing I think of right away is with John Saunders. I mean, the Heimer conundrum, right? Because when you have a Heimer, they're expensive, but they have that breakaway tip. Well, that breakaway tip is expensive too, but at least you're not breaking the whole thing. Well, it's kind of a running joke in a lot of shops that, oh, well, like, who broke the Heimer tip today? Because now we got to go order another $85, Ruby tip, because that's just the nature of that tool, right? You accidentally jog the machine ever so slightly in one direction the wrong way, and that thing's broken. Again, you're not breaking the tool, which is awesome, but it's a giant eye roll with the tip, right? And so he actually came out with a little, like one of those little calendars where it's been X amount of days since the last accident or since the last workplace injury, except it was about Heimer tips. And I was like, because it was always in, that happens all the time. It happens on video. Well, then embrace it. Like, oh, you broke a tip. Well, that's kind of embarrassing, especially if you're you're trying to be a machinist. Like, oh, you should know better to not jog the machine in the wrong direction. Well, you know what? Screw it. Let's embrace the fact that I broke this tip. Now I'm going to tell you how many days it's been. And really, that's the real value there. You can almost build a brand around that quirky off-kilter content that you accidentally didn't want to post or something along those lines too. There's opportunity even in those downsides. And I think that's the coolest thing about just putting stuff out there is there's always opportunity to embrace some of that stuff.
So true. So true. I mean, nobody likes to go, hey, look what I just messed up. But at the same time, everyone does want to see what you messed up because guess who else did it? Yeah, me last week and the guy the week before that. And this is how we humanize what's going on. Nobody's perfect. Are you kidding me? Stop pretending like we are.
Yeah, like in 2018 when a forklift driver dumped a machine off of a forklift at the IMTS. Like that I still see that picture circulating on the internet. And it's fun. You have to stop and look at it because you're like, oh, and you know that like that machine was sold to somebody when he was trying to leave and like all those it's like, oh, and if you're in this industry, you know how much that machine costs. It's not like just seeing a car crushed on the side of the road. Like that's a lot of money. That's a lot of opportunity cost. There's a lot of things that went into that machine being smushed on the floor. Like damn, you know?
Yeah, I'm wondering if State Farm had that one insured or whoever else we're getting our car insurance from. You mentioned the accidents on the side of the road.
Right? I mean,
So, what was that quote you said about safe marketing?
safe marketing is never good marketing.
Okay, so I know this podcast is about you, but I have to share this story.
Yeah.
Safe market. So I was just with the folks at Method Machine Tools in Arizona. You probably know those guys are just a little bit north of you.
Yeah.
And they've been machining this thing called the Thinking Man for a while. And a lot of people go, make me one, make me one. It's an 80-hour program, right?
Ooh.
So as a part of me being the silly person that I am and them already knowing me for many, many years and knowing that they were making the Thinking Man for a lot of people, they go, hey, would you mind doing a Thinking Man pose on a stool while we're machining it? And I go, the Thinking Man was naked, right? So we went back and forth a little bit about, going to the local Italian store and getting like a giant cannoli to cover me up or, something like that. Right. But it ended up being just me with my shirt off sitting there like I'm a thinking man. And the guy that's Cody, who's doing the programming, looks over and he's like, what the hell are you doing? Not safe at all is what I'm getting at. I mean, nobody wants to see me with my shirt off sitting there, but it creates a trend and a laugh, and people go, "What was it? What was it? Oh, okay, the Thinking Man. I get it now." And that's it, again, it's humanizing things. I didn't want to be naked with a cannoli, but I was willing to go in and have a little laugh with everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and the use case, and granted, this gets a little distant from manufacturing because obviously we have to approach it in a slightly different way. But the one of the use cases that I always use is are you familiar with the Squatty Potty brand?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't
well,
think so.
you and your listeners, I mean, like if you have the opportunity, look up the Harmon Brothers Squatty Potty commercial. It's brilliant. So the whole idea with the Squatty Potty is that you're supposed to put this stool when you're going to the bathroom and it's supposed to help you poop better. Like that's the whole premise. And how do you get people to, and they were on like Shark Tank and everything else, how do you get people to buy a stool to put in front of their toilet? So they do a commercial with a unicorn that poops ice cream. And yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. It is brilliant. I mean, but here's the best part about it. The whole commercial is actually teaching you why the Squatty Potty is actually better for your health. So they get you to stay there for like 5 to 6 minutes because there's a unicorn pooping ice cream.
That's brilliant.
It's right. I mean, and like I said, it's a commercial product. It's a little more distant from manufacturing, but these guys, like, they quadrupled their sales. They were on Shark Tank, and they quadrupled their sales with that commercial. And so, but my point is, like, that wasn't safe, right? I mean, you're taking a risk. I mean, and at that juncture, like within manufacturing, and within any industry, attention spans are not necessarily shorter, but there's more content out there to consume. And just because, and this is a really great guy that I've followed a number of his things. The idea that because there's more content out there does not mean that people have the ability to consume more, right? Just because, like, as I'm talking to you, I do have my cell phone sitting here just in case I get some crazy urgent email that I have to suddenly say, hey, can we pause this? It doesn't mean that I have the ability to read more posts and find more content out there, nor am I looking for more content. So instead, you need to find content that people are going to gravitate towards and be interested in. And that's all about, like, that goes all the way back to the oldest methodologies of marketing, and it's grabbing attention and pulling people in. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the goal of marketing in a nutshell. Now, whether pulling them in is keeping their eyes on something for more than 30 seconds, getting an email address, or getting them to shake your hand and get a sale. I mean, no matter what, it's all about that moving from one spot and getting them down that funnel to a more solidified position for you. But at that point, you can create millions of white papers. If it doesn't grab people's attention, if it doesn't solve their problems, they don't care. right? No one's going to care about your marketing. No one's going to care about your content. So at that point, then you're only relegated to, well, I hope we have a pretty logo because that's the only other way people are going to ever find you. You know what I mean? And so developing those ideas and trying to make sure that people understand you got to take some risk, and that's okay if it fails, because then you can, and that's something our industry is very familiar with, is failing fast. If you can fail fast, you can pivot a lot faster, and that means you lose less money and you can start making more the other direction. By taking risks, you fail faster. If you sit on the same mediocre plane, you're not going to know what's risky and what's not, and instead you're just going to keep churning through the same customers until they retire or they go to some other industry or whatever. I mean, eventually you're going to run out. And so there's just kind of this slow churn of mediocre customers. But if you take some risk and you push, there's more opportunity there. You might make a fool of yourself sitting there with naked with a baguette. But I mean, whatever you got to do, I mean, there is opportunity there. It's a conversation starter at worst,
Chris, that's incredibly valuable information. I'm absolutely sure the listeners are going, man, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. So I'll say it for them. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. So until we create the limitless pill that allows us to view all the content on the internet, I'm not sure if you've seen that movie or not, but pretty good movie. Where do you think in our industry we can focus and do better?
I'm going to say something and it's mildly controversial, but not in a way like when I say controversial that you would think it is. But I've written some stuff about this, and I've been thinking it and kind of preaching it for a long time. I think, and we kind of touched on it even, is lowering those barriers of competition. Because I think there is so much opportunity that people have to just work together, right? Find ways, and this goes for not just in a marketing aspect, right? Not just in my realm of, being somebody who creates content in this space, but manufacturers in general, whether we're talking about like the OEMs that are selling people the machine tools and tooling, or you're talking about the guys who are running, 5, 10, 50 guy shops or girl shops, right? Whether, doesn't matter what tier in the industry you're on, cooperating and communicating with each other is the best way to make that progress. And it's kind of a weird, like, it's trickier in this space because not only is this space older than, like, say, Silicon Valley software companies, but it's also more steeped in some of that tradition, but also we make stuff. So it's kind of, it's a lot easier to say, this thing is mine. Right? This, whatever, it's got this shape, it's got this angle, this thing is mine. And if someone else wants to sell it, they have to give me some money. It's a lot easier to do that in our space than it is in, like, say, a coding type of Silicon Valley space, because it's like, oh, well, maybe they'll find that code 10 years from now, maybe they won't, and it's just kind of buried in there. And there's so much open source stuff, maybe you can argue that's what it is. But the thing about our space is I think if more companies, just even if it was just having conversations with those competitors, and maybe even that, maybe they, like, industry secret type stuff drives me just batty, because that's some of the coolest stuff to get on camera from my perspective, and I can't use it because it's proprietary, and it's, but who's it proprietary from? Like, really, who's looking at this? And granted, even if they did, how much money are you really going to lose? You know what I mean? Like, now we're showing you and how well you do it. Are you really going to, like, is someone really going to go over here? Like, well, this guy's cheaper. Well, maybe he is, but I can do it because you saw it on video and I originated it. So you don't know. He's pulling that information from a video. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I think what our industry can really benefit from is embracing the idea that having more open communication about the type of work that we do and discussing best practices, whether that comes to running a business or cutting a part. I think there's some real opportunity there. And I think there's a lot of business to go around. Now, obviously, there's some stopgaps there. There's, depending on clients, and there's our limitations to that. And I'm not saying that everybody should open the kimono and offer everything up to everybody, right? But I do think that there are a lot of lost opportunities because folks just aren't communicating with each other. And I think that's where our industry could really improve. Go to IMTS and you see the little pictures. It's been a while since IMTS now, but there's those little pictures that say, no photography. And it's like, you're at a trade show, guys. Like, yeah, sorry, you're hurting yourself at that point if you're not letting people take pictures. There's opportunity, even if someone's going to steal something from you, there's still opportunity to communicate and share. And I think there'd be less incentive to quote unquote steal if folks were just willing to talk rather than putting up those walls and kind of hiding their stuff behind gates.
Yeah, good luck with that, by the way, Chris.
Oh, I know. Like I said, this is, and like I said, there is a very fine line, right? Because there are obvious limitations, and obviously you don't want to trump competition. I mean, there was a recent Harvard Business Review article that talked exactly about this, how like there are it benefits everybody, but there are strategic ways to share properly. And I think that's what it is. When I say that, people are like, they immediately think like, oh, we got to open the doors and let everybody in. You get to see what we do. No, not that. That's not what I mean. But also people go the entire other way. You know what I mean? And like, blackened windows and locked doors, and you can't see, you cannot even see things until they go out on the truck, and that's, I think there's some room in between those two spaces where I think our industry could really benefit.
I feel like there has to be, right? I mean, if you think about it, if we break this conversation down to understanding that a lot of this, I guess, tribal knowledge and lack of sharing comes from fear of some sort, whether it's fear of theft or reverse engineering or loss of profit or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. If we just break it all the way down to communication, then, I mean, think about it in your home. What happened if you stop talking? Well, your home might break down. You think about it in your community. Well, what happens there? What about your school? Well, same thing. So it's very obvious to me that the focus of communication and what you're saying there is incredibly valuable. And I also understand what you're saying is there's probably some people out there making things for defense that maybe we don't want to get out into the whole world, right? And so that's not what we're talking about. Yep. We're just talking about being able to sit down in a room with quote unquote competitors and hash it out, talk, see what's going on. You do too, but I get to work with a lot of people who embrace what they call competition, which I love hearing about. Oh, so-and-so is making a similar part that I am, but I'll buy this from them and they'll buy this from me. And we actually work together and we talk about how we can make certain components better. For me, I've seen that real recently in like the automotive industry with some of the folks I've been working with, Tony Saloom over at VAC Motorsports. And then I was just over at CP Carrillo in Southern California, and they both work together, yet exact same industry, doing very similar parts. And they both go, yeah, I know that guy, so it does exist. Could it be expanded upon? I agree with you. I think it could be. But we are built on having to keep secrets sometimes, right? I don't know about you, but how many NDAs have you signed? I've signed a bunch.
Endless, yeah. Well, and that's, so are you familiar with First Robotics at all?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so that's a great thing that gives kids an opportunity to compete, at a high school level by building robots and understanding manufacturing, engineering, and honestly, even marketing and things like that, because their whole goal is like they have to run it like a business. So they have to go out to their communities and get people to give them money as part of a sponsorship and things like that. So I mean, it's built like a business. But Dean Kamen's big thing with all of that is cooperation, which is competition, but cooperation, right? And like, so it's one of those things where it's like if one of these kids has a robot and then all of a sudden they get there and they realize their tools got stuck at the airport or something like that, right? They encourage those kids to go around to their competitors and ask for help with those tools to borrow a wrench here or whatever. I mean, whatever it might be. And they're encouraged to embrace that because really everyone starts to fail if one of your competitors, but also peers, starts to fail. and really that's a big part of manufacturing, especially in the United States, is this kind of like, it's this intermittent net of folks working together to build this industry. Well, if one is starting to fall to the wayside, and if they're falling to the wayside by their own fault, right? I mean, maybe they did something they weren't supposed to do or whatever. Okay, fine, they should fail. But if it's something like COVID hits, and there are some manufacturing businesses that see an uptick in business, and other ones that see a downturn, there's opportunity there to work with each other, find ways to develop more products that maybe that business over there can help bring, offset the need, right? If you're losing workers, or you're just losing business in general, there's a lot of communal effort within our industry that I think could be accelerated with some of that, just not full like dropping of the wall, but some lowering of those barriers. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I love that word, cooperation. I really like it's the first I've heard it. I'm going to use it from this day forward, because I think that's what you and I and a lot of other people in this industry are trying to promote. Is being able to cooperate in a competitive way, because we need a little competition, right? I mean, if we weren't still out there on the football field or soccer field or baseball field or whatever we like to compete in, we wouldn't be bettering ourselves. And that can be knowledge, and that can be programming and machining as well. But cooperation, dude, I like that a lot. So Chris, you have shared with us, I believe, a lot of insight, a lot of wisdom, a lot of really valuable information. But I typically like to sort of close out the show with a piece of advice. I don't know if I'm sure you probably have endless advice. And you've shared so much already. I'm not sure if there's a go-to for you, but I like it to kind of end off this show with a piece of advice, either for someone who's, looking to hop into the world we're in, looking to grow in the world we're in, or someone who's found themselves to be stagnant in the world we're in and could use a little bit of motivation. So any of those three, something that's helped you along the way, that you could kind of share with our audience and, give them a piece of Chris where they go, yeah, I'm going to take that with me for the rest of my life, or at least for the next week.
Right. Well, I love that. I mean, I'm not going to be able to give it to you in like a little sound bite, but from my perspective, I think the best thing, anybody who's either looking at our industry, thinking about our industry, or already in it, and like you said, feeling stagnant, I mean, the opportunity to build skills in this space is just endless. And there are so many people that are doing so much cool stuff on the internet that you can feed off of. I mean, so for instance, like if you're just, if you're one of the guys just pushing a button, right? And all you do is load a part, cycle start, wait. Like if that's your job and you're looking to like expand, there are tons and tons of tutorials for Fusion 360, for Mastercam, even SolidWorks Cam, like all the different platforms to learn how to program parts, or maybe even transgress beyond that and learn how to actually create 3D models yourself. I mean, there's opportunity all over the place, and that's just one example. But the other part about that too is building or trying to find opportunity by embracing something that interests you in this space. So if you're a machinist and you want to broaden your horizon a little bit, buy a 3D printer. You can get one for $200-300. I mean, now they're not fantastic, but they work, right? Start making parts in C, and maybe there's an opportunity there. Not maybe for the company that you work for to buy something from you. Maybe there's an opportunity to start your own business. I mean, there's so much cool stuff in this space, and there's such a gap of gap's not the right way to say it. There is so much. I'm going to use a marketing term, but there's so much blue ocean that there's a lot of opportunity if you know what you're doing, or even have an inkling of what you're doing, that you can figure it out as you move into that blue water. And I think that that's if there's any piece of advice, I mean, I'm a product of it, right? I started in this space as a journalist, and now I do video marketing. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? Like, but it's because I entered that space because I knew how to ask the right questions, and I talked to folks. And I tell you what, machinists and engineers are not the most outgoing individuals. So when you put a camera in front of them, you got to try to coax some language out of them. And being in the industry for so long, I'm able to do that because I talk with these people all the time. If you can find some little nichey thing like that that you can just embrace, run with it, you know. And if your company that you work for currently doesn't have an opportunity, start your own business, because there's so much room for building that kind of stuff.
Well said, Chris. Well, I'm absolutely sure that there are people listening right now that are going, well, this Chris dude, he's pretty smart. How can I find him? Where can we find you? Where can we learn more about you? Websites, LinkedIn's, Instagrams, house address, you name it. Where can we find you best?
Well, I am on LinkedIn. You know, if you search for Chris Fox and you look for the guy with the bald head and giant beard, I mean, it's pretty obvious which one's me. There are a lot of Chris Foxes in the engineering space, but I think
it's
I'm
such
the
an
only
unusual
one.
Name. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know, right? But I'm pretty sure I'm the only one, or one of the few that looks like I do. But otherwise, thechrisfox.com is my website, and that's just kind of that focuses on my content building and stuff like that. But I am very much a product of our industry, and I'm one of those people that even if you just want to bounce an idea or talk shop, I'm always up for figuring things out and bouncing around ideas. I have a number of phone calls every week that have nothing to do with building any sort of clientele. It's more just communicating, and let's have a conversation, because I love this industry. Once I started to find out how stuff actually got made, I got hooked, and here we are today. So
awesome. Absolutely fantastic. Well, Chris, thank you for being a part of the Gunn Show. And for those of you listening, remember cooperation. I think that's important for us all to remember. And again, thechrisfox.com. Look him up. Amazing dude, full of wisdom. Chris, I learned a ton today. Thank you so much for being a part of the Gunn Show.
Thank you. This has been a good time.